Picture the coffee shop you love most, the one with the lines spilling onto the sidewalk by 8 in the morning, steam wands hissing nonstop, a barista calling out names faster than people can grab their cups. You look at that scene and think, this place must be printing money. Here's the twist. That line isn't proof the shop is winning. It might be the exact moment it's losing the most money it will lose all day. A packed coffee shop isn't a business hitting its stride. It's a business slamming into a ceiling it can't see and paying for the privilege of standing at it. On paper, opening a coffee shop looks like one of the friendliest math problems in small business. No fleet of trucks, no industrial kitchen, just an espresso machine, a grinder, a few hundred square feet, and a menu that fits on a chalkboard. Total startup costs for an independent cafe typically land somewhere between $250,000 and $450,000. Real money, but a fraction of what almost anything else with a kitchen attached would cost. And then there's the margin, the number that actually gets people to sign the lease. A cup of coffee that sells for $2 might cost 50 cents to make. Beans, cup, lid, sleeve, a few seconds of labor. That's a 75% gross margin. Push into specialty drinks and it climbs toward 85%. Compare that to a restaurant running burgers at 30%, or a bar pouring drinks at 50%, and coffee stops looking like food service. It starts looking like selling water with better branding. So the dream writes itself. Rent a corner on a walkable street. Build a menu out of drinks that cost pennies and sell for dollars. Open the doors, let word of mouth do the rest, and watch a business with 80% margins compound into real money. Break even should land somewhere between month 12 and month 24. After that, it's supposed to be gravy. Nobody opening a cafe does the math on how many drinks one barista can physically make in an hour. Nobody prices their lease against the ceiling of their own bar. The 80% margin is real, on the cup. What happens to it between the cup and the bank account is where this story actually lives. And it's a story almost no first-time owner ever gets told. Start with the number every new owner falls for, 80%. Real, but it's gross margin, not profit. The gap between what a cup costs to make and what it sells for, before anything else in the business touches that money, and a lot touches that money. Follow one transaction all the way through and 80% shrinks fast. The average ticket at most independent shops isn't the $6 oat milk cortado on the chalkboard. It's closer to $5. Once you blend in the drip coffees, the small pour-overs, the guy who just wants black coffee in a paper cup, $5 at 80% margin is $4 of gross profit. That $4 now has to survive contact with the rest of the business. Labor's waiting first. This isn't a business you run lean and still run fast. Someone has to be behind that machine every second the doors are open, whether 3 people are in line or 30. Industry-wide, labor eats 25 to 35% of revenue at a healthy independent cafe. Push past that and you're not paying for service anymore. You're bleeding, and labor doesn't scale down the way a supply order can. You still need a body on the espresso machine at 7 a.m., whether 4 customers walk in or 40. Then rent. 10 to 15% of revenue is the textbook range, but that assumes a textbook location. The corner spot with the walkable foot traffic, the line spilling onto the sidewalk that made this whole dream look so obvious a minute ago. That doesn't rent at textbook rates. Landlords price commercial space on visibility and foot traffic, and a visibly busy cafe is by definition sitting on some of the most desirable retail real estate on the block. In dense urban corridors, rent alone can climb past 20%, sometimes well past it, before a single payroll dollar or bag of beans gets paid for. Stack in the cost of the product itself. Beverage-only cost of goods is genuinely cheap, 15 to 20% of the sale price, which is part of why coffee looked so attractive to begin with. But almost no cafe survives on beverages alone. The moment a pastry case or a breakfast sandwich gets added, and most add one, because food is what pulls people in outside the morning rush, cost of goods climbs toward 25 to 35%. Restaurant territory, not beverage territory. The margin that looked like selling water with better branding starts looking a lot more like running a restaurant. Add it up. 80% gross margin on the cup. 25 to 35% gone to labor. 10 to 20+% gone to rent. Another chunk gone to cost of goods once food enters the picture. Utilities, insurance, equipment maintenance, card processing, spoiled milk that didn't sell before close, all stacking on top. By the time everything clears, the shops calling themselves successful land a net margin somewhere between 2.5% and 10%. 80% gross margin on the product. 2 to 10% net margin on the business. Read those two numbers back to back. That gap isn't bad luck. It's the business working exactly as designed, quietly converting a beautiful product margin into a mediocre business margin. There's one more layer underneath all of this, and it doesn't show up on any spreadsheet because it isn't a cost line. It's a speed limit. A single espresso bar, staffed well, running efficiently, can turn out somewhere around 40 to 60 drinks an hour at full peak intensity. That's the ceiling, not soft, hard, set by how fast one person can pull a shot, steam milk, and hand off a cup. Doesn't matter if the line is 10 deep or 50 deep. Once that bar is running at capacity, the shop is making its maximum possible revenue for that hour, whether the crowd is barely visible from the street or wrapped around the block. This changes how you have to read a busy coffee shop. A packed dining room usually means more tables turning, more money moving behind the scenes. A packed coffee shop past the point of bar saturation means something else entirely. Demand has exceeded what the shop can convert into cash, and everyone standing past that point in line is financially invisible. They might wait it out and buy their $5 drink 20 minutes late, or they might take one look and walk to the shop across the street. Either way, the crowd stopped being a growth signal the second the bar hit its ceiling. Most owners have no idea where that ceiling even sits. Here's the mechanism stated plainly. Revenue has a hard physical ceiling. Costs don't know that ceiling exists. They keep climbing with the crowd long after the crowd has stopped generating more cash. Once that bar hits its limit, nothing that happens for the rest of the hour adds a single dollar to the register. But everything visible about the shop keeps escalating. The line gets longer. The sidewalk gets more crowded. The pressure behind the counter builds because more people are showing up than the bar can process, not because the business is doing more business. An owner watching that scene does the only thing that seems to make sense. They hire more hands to manage the line, take orders faster, keep the chaos from spiraling. It looks like a reasonable response to success. It's actually a reasonable response to a bottleneck, and those are not the same problem. Even though they look identical from behind the counter, the extra staff might shave a few minutes off the wait. They will not raise the ceiling past a certain point. That isn't a staffing problem, it's a physics problem. One person, one shot, one machine at a time. You can add a cashier, you can't add drinks per hour without adding an entire second bar, and that's a construction project, not a hiring decision. So labor climbs to match the crowd the owner can see, while revenue stays capped at what the bar that can physically produce. That gap is the trap. It isn't high overhead, the explanation reached for by default, the one vague enough to describe almost any small business having a rough year. This is more specific, more mechanical. The cost side responds to visible demand. The revenue side responds to bar capacity. Past a certain point, those two things stop moving together at all. Layer in the rent. That corner location wasn't cheap, and the landlord priced it on the assumption that foot traffic converts into revenue for whoever's paying the lease. But the throughput ceiling means only a fraction of that traffic ever can convert, no matter how desirable the real estate. The shop pays premium rent for total foot traffic while only being able to monetize peak hour traffic up to the bar's limit. Everyone who walks past, sees the line, and keeps walking is traffic the rent is pricing in that the business structurally cannot capture. It's also why, just raise your prices. The advice every struggling owner hears only half works. Higher prices mean more revenue per drink. They do nothing to raise how many drinks the bar can physically make in an hour, which is the actual ceiling. A shop already running full during its busiest hours can take home a little more per cup. It cannot out-earn its own bar speed. The ceiling isn't a pricing problem. It's a production capacity problem wearing a pricing disguise. If this sounds theoretical, it isn't. It played out in one of the most public cafe failures in recent memory. And the business in question wasn't struggling to attract customers. It was one of the highest grossing restaurants in the country. The coffee shop opened on Union Square in Manhattan in 1990, and for 28 years it was exactly the kind of place this video opened with. Busy from open to close, the sort of room where the crowd never seemed to thin out. By sales volume, it ranked among the top restaurants in America. Not top coffee shops, top restaurants, period, competing against steakhouses and hotel dining rooms with menus 4 times the price. In October of 2018, it closed. Co-owner Charles Millete explained why to Forbes, and the numbers are worth sitting with. Rent had climbed to roughly 27% of gross revenue, nearly triple the healthy range for this kind of business. Layer on a scheduled $2 an hour minimum wage increase. Spread across 150 employees, across every shift, that single wage bump would have added roughly $46,000 to the monthly payroll. Over $500,000 a year, for a business already handing over more than a quarter of its revenue, just to occupy the space. Millete didn't describe a business that had lost its audience. He described the opposite. When a restaurant is one of the top ranked in the country by sales and can no longer afford to operate, he said, you have to look at that and admit there's a shifting paradigm in the business. Top ranked by sales and still couldn't afford to keep the doors open. Same mechanism, restaurant scale instead of espresso bar scale. Identical shape. Revenue capped by how many covers a fixed dining room could turn during the hours people actually wanted to eat. A ceiling reached years earlier, which the crowd outside had been proving the whole time. Rent kept climbing because the location that produced that crowd was by definition premium real estate. Labor kept climbing because a business running at full visible capacity needs a full staff to run it, whether or not revenue is still growing underneath that staff. 2 cost lines, both tied to how busy the place looked. Neither tied to how much more money that busyness could actually produce. There's a second case that shows the other half of this story. Who benefits when a shop hits this exact wall? In Davis, California, a cafe called Common Grounds spent 12 years building the kind of loyal, visibly busy, following every new owner dreams about. Never missed a rent payment. Their landlord evicted them anyway to bring in a Starbucks. We were so busy, and this was a happening place, owner Michelle Kim said, and now I lost everything. The foot traffic Common Grounds, spent 12 years building, didn't disappear when they left. It got handed to a tenant who could pay more for it, because a chain with centralized purchasing and multiple order formats can push closer to that ceiling than an independent operator ever could. So if the crowd isn't the winner, and the person behind the counter isn't either, who actually comes out ahead? The landlord, almost by design. Rent gets priced against total foot traffic, not convertible foot traffic. The landlord doesn't need to understand bar throughput to benefit from it. Just watch the sidewalk. When a location proves itself by producing exactly the kind of line this video opened with, the incentive isn't to protect the business that built that crowd. It's to find whoever can pay more for it next. That's not a betrayal. It's just the ceiling mechanism, expressed as a real estate decision instead of a staffing one. The other winner is whoever engineers around the ceiling instead of just living inside it. Mobile order ahead that queues customers digitally instead of physically. Multiple bar stations. Drive-through formats that separate the line from the room entirely. These aren't better coffee shops. They're the same business with a different answer to the one question that actually decides profitability. How many drinks can move through this space in an hour? Chains solve that with capital and format. Most independents never get to ask the question at all. Best case for an independent owner: read the ceiling early and spend money on throughput, a second machine, a redesigned counter, a mobile queue, instead of spending it on staff to manage a line that was never going to convert anyway. Worst case is Union Square. 28 years, one of the highest grossing restaurants in the country, a line that never really went away, and it still wasn't enough. Because that's what's actually sitting underneath every crowded cafe you've ever walked past. The line was never the business succeeding in front of you. It was the business running out of room, in real time, while everyone standing in it mistook the wait for proof they were about to get something the shop could actually afford to give them.